So, login time. I thought you were a hacker. Okay. Way technology works. All right, my name is Mattias. I'm from Sweden. I'm passionate about software. I love improving things. Like, I'm a very curious guy, and I like trying out stuff. And I thought I was going to share with you some experiences I've had the last number of years. Now, this actually goes back a couple of years ago when I had the pleasure to visit Toyota and actually visit some of the software engineering departments that they had at Toyota. So think back maybe 5 years, coming there as an Agile practitioner, very curious, wondering, well, okay, so what goes on behind the scenes? And when we entered the building, the software manager basically told us, well, I'm not sure, but you are going to be a bit, maybe dissatisfied. I think you are well ahead of us. And I thought, really? Now, and when they walked us through their software practices, it felt for me like they were trailing a couple of years behind. So I don't want to downplay what they were doing, because they were doing some really good things. And the honesty that the managers showed us was incredible. As an example, we once pointing out that there was some gap in the reasoning that they were doing. And the manager immediately reported, okay, that meant that he had to go back and redo a problem-solving exercise to find the source of that problem. So just tell you the mindset that these guys were in, right? But ever since that day, I had a lingering question, wondering, so if these guys are experts in doing continuous improvement, how come that the ideas that came next door didn't travel over to the software department? How come they took the trip around the world until they got there? So what's missing, or what could be done better? And I will share some of those minds and ideas with you during this session. So first, let's step back. What is continuous improvement? Okay, what's the definition? Well, it starts from the existing result. You look back at some real data, like what the time it took to complete the last project, and that's your starting point. Then you figure out, okay, if you can achieve a better state, even if it's just a few percent, that is great. Now, it's not. You should be up here, and then failing to get there. Because failing to get there, it's very hard to learn anything from that. Because you just visualize a dream, and failure to meet that dream is very hard to learn anything from. So start from an example, a real case, and improve from that, even if the truth is very ugly. The way that Toyota uses this, and this of course is for manufacturing, the way that they use continuous improvement is through standardized work. So standardized work meaning a description of the sequence of how work should be done, and a timeline that shows you the part of that work, and I'll show you an example here. So this shows you what the expected takt time might be. So takt time is the time that the company or the factory should produce a new item so that it runs in rhythm with the demand from the customer. And the station needs to perform its activities before the end of the takt time. So this is standardized work, and it's used for training. It's used to drive out variability, because now if we do these things correctly, we will always do it at the same time, an equally amount of time. And finally, it's used for improvement. And the way improvements happen is by comparing my new idea of how this setup should be towards the existing way it's done, and proving that my setup is better or faster than the last one. right? So it's very, very simple to do improvements, right, in this manufacturing environment, and this is how they do it. Now that then becomes a new standard. So if you look behind this, it's quite a disciplined approach to change. And the big idea is, if you do a change initiative, you then want to persist that change initiative so you don't roll back later. So think of it as you moving up a ladder and never ever going back. That's the main idea. So there are basically 4 steps in doing change. First, define, okay? Define a way of work that shows you your capability. Then achieve it, right? Learn that you can do that. Once you've done that, remains the hardest part. Thirdly, you maintain this. You prove that you have the ability to keep this level in the future. And fourthly, you seek perfection. You never stop. You challenge the existing way of work until you get a better one. And in my experience, in some of the cases I will talk to you about and show you, the hardest parts are the top 2 steps. So, I'm going to talk to you about a case here and some background, because at this specific company, we try to use some of the ideas which I'm sharing with you now. And the background of this company is, it has a legacy product that exists on the market. It has a fair market share. It's not bad, right? It's one of the top market leaders out there. But the challenges are that the product is becoming heavier and heavier to maintain, right? Very brittle legacy code, hard to touch, 6-month release cycles, so feels sluggish, and they are struggling to keep up with market expectations. So that's the starting point. And the setup of this company is, they have the traditional functions here. We have a sales function that's selling it. We have consultants that do training and customer adaptation. A product management function. We have software development and support. So all these functions work together in the value chain to drive this profitability of this product. Now, after 1.5 years, we managed to get to a situation where the largest part of the legacy product was replaced, and the eyes on the customer, the legacy product no longer exists. So it's been replaced by something new. We're running 3 weeks release cycles today, and we have all through this journey grown the business of this product. Now, the way that we managed to do that, one of the cornerstones that we used was continuous improvement, right? There were some other factors to play in, but continuous improvement was definitely one of them that made this possible. So the question is, how? So let's think of now, what's different with product development? So obviously you understand that manufacturing is a different animal, and this is what the Toyota managers told us too. So we asked, why aren't you borrowed ideas? And they said, the reason is because we think that software development is a different animal. And in this they were right. Okay. So how is it different? Well, first of all, we work with fleeting opportunities, right? When we put something out, we don't know if that's going to be an opportunity or not. Or an opportunity might show unexpectedly, and it's up for us to grab it. And typically in a product development scenario, you will look for a very high signal-to-noise ratio, meaning it's sometimes very hard to figure out what is noise or what is signal. What should I lead my improvements with, right? And this is difficult because to grasp these opportunities that might be fleeting, might be there for just a short period of time, we need to make fast decisions. Because failure to make fast decisions means the opportunity will disappear and we will lose the edge, right? This is similar to warfare. And the Marines have a saying where they say that if you wait for 80% of the information, you waited too long. And the same situation happens for us. If we wait too long, the opportunity disappears. But the trouble here is because we have so much noise in trying to understand what goes on around us, especially if we're talking about market feedback, that it's hard to understand what is signaled. And the trouble is that if we ask for yet more information, that might not help us out, right? And the reason is, giving more information, the decision time will slow down. So this is famous from information theory. It's called Hicks' law. And it tells you that the time to make decisions, T, is dependent on the number of options, which is N. And log 2 is a simulative. You basically typically do binary search of options, right? So decision time rises with the number of options. So just getting more information is not the solution to making faster decision. We need to find the right information. And the right information typically exists right where the problem is. Right? We need to go to the source to find this information. And this is something that we learned too. Now, a reason why this might be hard is because we are dealing with independent parts that act together. So the question is, if we do something about A here, we do improvement, will that lead to an impact in the end? And the answer might be, we don't know. We might need to learn that. And that is not completely so that there's a one-to-one relationship between these. It might be so that the factor that we try to affect is less dominant, and we don't even know about the other interaction that goes on. So we need to learn this interaction and how they affect each other. And to do that, we need to close this feedback loop in some way. So this is a challenge in product development. We need to close the feedback loop so we can learn about the effect of our interactions. You know, if I do test-driven development, will that lead to shorter lead time, or was it something else that proved it more important to get shorter lead time, right? And we can go on and on and on and on. So, to sum up, in product development, we deal with emergent opportunities. We have multivariable problems, interlinked problems. So if we jank one chain, it might have effect in another one, which we are not sure of when we get going. And we are moving in unknown territory because we are trying out things where no one has gone before. And this is the way that we make money, right? It's by building something new that we can charge a margin for our products. So we can't remove this uncertainty. We must accept it. The question is, now, how are we going to deal with it? Now, given this background, is this an excuse to put all our faith in emotional-based improvements? And I would suggest that we can do better than that. So, what would it mean to transfer this, define, achieve, maintain, and challenge to our environment? What would that look like? So first step is to find a baseline, a starting point, because we can't find a baseline, we can't maintain. So where do we go and catch the baseline? So let's argue about where we should place it, right? Should we place it as a standard of how we do work? Should we adapt the philosophy from manufacturing, telling us that there is a standard how work should be done? Okay, that's an interesting question, and I think we still have not seen an answer to that question, and I think we have more here to discover. But the more obvious answer is, since we try new things, right, a standard might be insufficient and might even prevent us from doing good products. And the way that we deal with repetitive work, which is the way that standard wants to ensure is done correctly in our world, is, we automate the stuff. Right? Boring work, right? Let the machine do it. Okay? So that's how we attack repetitive work in our environment. So maybe standard work is interesting because we might have plenty of repetitive stuff, but we try to deal with it mainly by automating it. Should we place the baseline on feedback from the product in the market? Maybe. The potential drawbacks here might be that the feedback loop might be very late. We might need to wait 1 year to get the feedback. And also, potentially, there will be very much noise in this feedback, because now we're moving even out of a territory which we no longer control, and the main input is from new information which we hadn't touched before. So, potentially, if we would try to make this a baseline, it will make us sluggish. So what if we place the baseline as the output of the system that we're doing? So output of the system, an example could be the lead time, or something that we do together to achieve. Well, we have more of the system under our control. So we can potentially get faster feedback if we place a baseline here. We could also use that to learn about how the dependencies work, right? Is it so that if I do something different in sales, that would impact the support? Or if I change how we do support, that would impact the sales, right? It gives an opportunity to learn how these dependencies work out, and can help us sub-optimize the parts. So that's an interesting question, and in this case, that's where we decided to try to put the baseline. Now the next question is, when do you act? Right? So you take your typical capability and you watch it and you try to measure it in some way, you'll see that it moves around. Like that. So when do you act? Okay, statistics can help us in this issue. If we draw the mean in the middle of the diagram, we can expect that the body of all events will occur here along the mean, assuming some type of normalized like distribution, of course. Now, that would mean that we expect that majority of events would take care between some statistically defined limits here, and these are what we call, for control chart, we call them upper and lower control limits, and the definition being that we expect the majority of events to occur between those. So if we choose upper and lower control limit to be equal to 2 standard deviations from the mean, it will mean that we expect 95% of all events to happen in between. So if we have an event now that happens outside this limit, that's something interesting, right? We need to learn from that. That's something that was not expected to happen. So this could provide us some guidance into understand when is the right time to go and have a look. So in a typical scenario, if we have 4 departments working together, or 4 functions, we would like them to work like in one focused effort like that. However, that's rarely the case. It might look something more like this. Each department trying something because on their own. So the question is, how can you make them work a little bit more aligned? Well, what if we can bring the situation awareness to all these functions so that they saw the same thing? Now, would that make it possible for these functions to start to learn, about how the interactions affect each other and when they pull in the right direction? And my experience is that in product development, if some improvements that you want to do, they touch upon all these functions, and it's not until you get all those en route that you actually are able to grasp new business advantages. So we want something more like this, right? That would be nice if we can get, even if we can just even them out slightly. So how can we get there? Now, what's the step? Now, my experience is that the functions that are involved in creating the product, the longer they are from the problem, the longer the distance, the higher the fear. So in psychology, it means that if we can prove that they all see the same situation, there will be less fear and fear projection selling, oh, they are the problem, they are not doing it as they should, and etc. So it has a meaning not only to get improvement efforts done, but also to decrease the level of uncertainty for the people involved in the product. So in this example, what we did is we created a very simple board, right? We call it a walk-by board, where you can go at any point of time and have a complete overview of how the product was doing. Now this board has some simple parts. First, this part here, that's where we have our baseline. Okay, there we have our understanding of 4 things: how the business is doing, how the flow is developing, how the quality is moving, and also some market feedback in terms of support. Okay. Now, this board we made available so that anyone in this function could potentially walk by and see it. Now, for some of this function, this was not very easy because they were actually often out in clients, right? They were visiting clients, doing sales. So for them to get this feedback was harder. But the way that we solved that is to make sure that because the managers were sitting in the same building, that they would represent the function to give them this feedback. Now this walk-by board, we asked the managers to go by once every second week. We found was a good rhythm. And what we wanted them to do is, if we saw that our capability was decreasing, to start asking questions, right? This is the maintain step. We also had some other parts here, what the different departments are focusing on. And this is to get, for example, give support an idea of what sales are doing, and for sales to get an idea of what support are doing. And finally, we have the last part here, which is improvement. Okay, what are the different departments improving on? When I put this up the first time, I actually left the improvement part here empty, because I didn't understand what sales were doing in type of improvements, and I didn't understand what support were doing for type of improvements. And I thought, now I came back a month later that this would be empty still, because I never informed anyone that should say anything. Amazingly, when I came back, all these different parts were filled in. There were plenty of improvements happening. So that was a pleasant surprise, but that no one knew about them. Right? We had no idea what sales were doing. Sales had no idea what support was doing, but now suddenly we saw that. And that was amazing. Now finally we had an area here where we handled improvements which was cross-functional, improvements that needed to work across several functions. So this is a complete overview that we tried to get in place. And what we learned was for it to work, we needed to have the managers who take responsibility of this board. Until the manager took responsibility of parts of this, it sort of never took off. But from the moment they said, I'm going to update this part, I'm going to make sure that that part is updated, then we got this working. And what happened is that every second week, we would walk by this board together with management, with one representative of each function, and we will walk through it, right, in a very easy 15-minute manner. Now, some examples of things that we discovered doing this. Right, this is just telling you that we need to act when we have a decline in capability, right? And the way that we used that was we wanted the managers to actually come and ask us questions. We didn't ask the manager to come and tell us how to do, but start interrogating and asking questions to find out if we can understand what might have changed. So here's an example of what we found out. This is real data, and this is measuring the quality out in production. It's one of the charts that we had on the board. And if you watch this chart, you will see that some things are happening. And one thing that we found out here, that we had a couple of peaks here, right? Turns out that when we launched the chart and had run it for a short period of time, we observed these peaks, and we started asking, what are they? Turns out that all these peaks meant that the system that we had in production went down. So that's why you see the large number of quality reminders here. Now, the question is why? So we started to investigating that. And it turns out that the hosting provider that we were using was taking the system down on a regular basis without telling us. Now, of course, until that moment, we had no idea that that was happening. But that gave us an opportunity to actually try to fix that. And now what I'm doing now is I'm telling you how we found this out in 5 seconds, but in real life, to find this out was basically a 3-week ordeal. And the first thing that we found out when we tried to understand why are these peaks so high, I mean, there was no card that enabled them to remote boot the machine. There's amazing things that you find out when you try to discover what happens, right? Now, when we surfaced this, in the beginning, the platform engineer was a bit hesitant about, we tried to ask them questions about doing things, but I know that they're a bit far away. I don't know how I'm going to talk with them. So what we did is we brought the product manager here, who has responsibility of the income of the product. And when he saw this, it was a no-brainer to call the third-party software provider and said, okay, if you want a new card to boot the system, you have it today. So that's how we started to learn and how we started to fix that problem. And we wouldn't have done that without this overview. Now, the second step, once we got a baseline, is learning to do controlled experiments. So what is that? What's a controlled experiment? Well, basically, first, to do an experiment, we must start by understanding the situation. We must start by proving we understood enough of the situation to make a hypothesis of potential solution. So this is not trying something and then, whoops, something happens. This is going and gather knowledge so we can formulate a hypothesis of a better state. And not until we've done that, we can move on. So we formulate a hypothesis of what a better state can be based on the experience that we gathered. And the way that we gathered the experience was what we noticed, that the charge would tell us something was wrong. Okay. But it did not tell us what. Right? To get that understanding, there was only way to do that, and that was go to where the problem was. Now go to the front line. If the problem was reported from the trainers, we needed to ask the trainers about the details of what they experienced. If it came from the support, we needed to ask support, etc. Now that was the only place we would get quality information of what we needed to fix. Now after we formulate the hypothesis, then we try it. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. And of course after that we could evaluate how that turned out. Now, what if you think back in your environments and you think of some of the change programs that you run, what if all of those were based on a hypothesis before you started them? Imagine how they would turn out instead. So, with this mindset, right, we can treat change as an idea and as a hypothesis which we verify and then move on. And this is different because, you know, we need to balance two situations in product development. We have to just try, right? When we try stuff, that's very fast. Try stuff is easy. The trouble is there's no learning, because we didn't go and discover anything before we did the experiment. So how can we learn from the outcome? Now, on the other end, we have the situation where we go and understand every detail beyond any doubt. The trouble is that this is too late, and it will probably generate more information that we can compile. So we need to find something in between. So since I'm the speaker, I get to say that I think the control experiments lives here, right in the middle. Of course, it could be somewhere along one or the other ends, but somewhere in between we need to stay, right? Because we get ups, downsides on both sides, which we don't want. So I call this enlightened trial and error. Right? Gain understanding before you do experiments. So here's an example how this turned out. Someone shows up telling we have an unexpected rise in number of production issues or support tickets, and saying something's wrong. Okay, so that is understanding that something has changed. Now, the old way that this would have turned out, that it would have started with a rumor coming from a client somewhere, and then there will be panic. Managers will run and they will pull together people and attacking that problem in some manner, and it will be all hands on deck until the problem is solved. Now, that is how we behaved before we changed our mindset. And the problem here is not that we fix the problem. The problem here is that there is no learning happening. Every time we do that, it's not generating new insights. So we need to fix that. So, learning to do better. You know, how did this change our approach? All right, we back down, same situation appears. Unexpected rise in support tickets, right? What's wrong? Is it the new releases that we just put out? I know that they were stable. I heard developers talking about it, so must be that. But the manager steps in, say, actually, cool it. Let's go check the facts and learn. So we start by understanding the situation. And in this specific example, that understanding starts by actually digging in support cases, right? Is this the truth? So we need to plow through some support cases, and that can be tedious, but we have some help to our advantage. Now, if you take 1,000 support cases, you can use statistics sampling to extract a representative pool of them that you can try to investigate. And suddenly, looking through 1,000 support cases might turn out to actually look at 88. And 88 support cases you can look through in potentially 2 hours. Right? And that meant that we could have potentially one developer together with support manager walking through these cases and trying to understand what is happening. So in this specific example, we're using a confidence level of 95% and a margin of error in our sampling of 10. But just as saying, you can use statistical sampling to extract the necessary information to investigate. That's a very powerful technique. All right. After we've done that, we can then formulate a hypothesis, right? So is this due to our released features? Because if it was, it would prove to be a major factor. And we can validate this. And again, this is real data. This is showing a number of different factors, extracting from those support cases and trying to understand which is the one dominating. And these factors here are, first there are questions, right? How do I do that? Then the other question, which is, more of a kind, okay, I understand, but I need help to complete my issue. Then we have the feature bugs. then we have some different other items that we can extract. So given this information, was it the fact that the last release we made was full of bugs? And probably not. Probably some other factor. Of course, one factor could be that we released it, but it was unusable, right? Potential cause. Another potential cause might be that suddenly we got users that didn't know the product unexpectedly, right? Turned out to be the case, right? Suddenly we got the start of a new season. We suddenly got a big boost in new people that came along, and that turned out to be the issue here. So the issue was not software. The issue was we hadn't prepared the users for our software. So problem is elsewhere, right? This is showing you one of the loops that many loops that we made during this journey. So we didn't start out this way. So we didn't start out thinking in this slightly disciplined manner. There was actually one event that turned ourselves around. And this was pretty early on. We were trying to fix parts of the product, and we were using test-driven development as one of the tools to do so. May not surprise you. Now, in this process, we had commitments made to clients around, and basically what's happened was that we had overcommitted and overestimated the capability of our delivery, right? Probably never happened to you. All right, so at this moment where this stress is pretty high in this organization because you need to face decisions and they know that they're probably overcommitted. One of the managers walks down to the developers and asks, so, you do this TDD stuff, how is that doing? And they get the answer, well, actually, I think I'm a little bit slower now. I'm not sure if you understand how that, escalated really rapidly up the chain of command. And within hours, there was an executive session called through in which we would try to investigate this, right? Developers being slow, that's we can't have that, right? Okay, so, all right, at this moment, I had the opportunity to actually go and meet, I had the opportunity to go and meet the management to say, well, what's going on? All right, so what I did was I said, okay, let's have a look at the facts. So I extracted some of the facts that we had worked with, and I show it to them. So I said, first, okay, there's two things I want you to have a look at. One is the team's velocity. So this is how many stuff they churn out, okay? And I said, okay, we introduced test-driven development some way here. Are we turning out less things now? And they examine the chart, and they draw the conclusion that, well, that's not clear, right? It seems like we are roughly turning out the same amount of stuff. I said, sure. Okay. That's also what I see. Then I asked, this is a lead time. This is a time to market that we have from when someone idea shows up until we actually put it out. How is that behaving? It seems to be a lot faster. Right, so can we then draw the conclusion about what is happening? And they said, yeah, it seems like we are going faster. Right? So this was a major turning point in the mindset of management, where they understood the necessity of go and learn and check the facts before making decisions. And that is the moment where we started to do this on a regular basis, and when the management and the people in the organization started to remind each other to go and learn before drawing conclusions too quickly. So, if we manage to do this really easily, what then? Are we done? Right? Everything is safe? Should we stop there? No, I actually think that we have one step left. So this poor guy, taking a swim in a cup of chocolate, is that mission impossible? Right? Is it impossible to swim in a cup of chocolate being a cookie? Maybe it could be hard. It could be hard, but it's impossible. How do we know if we never ask that question? Do you ask for it? Do you ask for if it is possible? If you don't ask for it, how do you know? I once worked with a team that had a software tester. And she was leading the test of the team in roughly 4 days. Okay? And when she was leading the test, I watched at her and I asked, so what if you will complete the test in half a day? What would that look like? And she froze and she looked at me. And first she said, that's impossible. And I said, is it? How would that work out? Well, for that to work out, actually, development needs to take a lot more bigger responsibility. They can't release bad stuff to me. I said, no. And for that to work out, and we argued through the different options that needed to be there for that to work out, and she finally realized that maybe it was possible. But until that moment, because no one asked her, she had never started thinking about that. So I'm not saying, when I'm saying challenge, I'm not saying do more stuff or work more overtime. No, I'm saying providing a mental challenge to the people who do the work. Because it's at that moment that we challenge our assumptions of how the world should look like. And I see this doing exercises with teams frequently. Whereas in the beginning, they might start on a different path of a solution, and they try to pursue on that. And it's not until they get the question to say, I know a team who did this 10 times faster, that they see they challenge their way of world and basically said, okay, we need to start all over thinking how we do stuff today. And there are several examples of product development where this has happened. Prius car, can you get a car that takes virtually no fuel and put 5 people in it, and can you build it in 15 months? You have the Polaris submarine, where the big principle was, whenever you develop a subsystem for the submarine, you need to think big or get out. Right? So when you hear this, it changes your mind. Right? So we need to start asking this question, asking about the impossible from time to time, to realizing that there are total other ways of doing stuff. So for me, to challenge someone is the highest form of respect. Because it means that we believe in that person's ability to find a new way. And it also means that we are interested not in staying where we are today, but being somewhere else tomorrow and staying competitive. Oops, spelling error. So these insights and examples are quite unlikely to arrive from within your known domain. And if you think of it, you have in your domain maybe 50, 100 people. In the world around you, there's 6 billion. Right? Where do you think you will get the next idea from? So we need to start look outside our domain and compare with different fields to gather these ideas and insights. And as I tell you, when I watch teams, they always think something is impossible until they watch another team and see that it is. And when they watch the other team, they typically say, they don't play by the rules. And we say, no, they don't. And then it clicks, right? That you can do it in a totally different manner. So we must allow ourselves to not get trapped in a box, thinking, okay, everything we know is within our 4 walls. Right? We need to understand that to gather ideas is something that we need to look around us, and especially the ideas that you're looking for are the ones that you feel could happen, impossible, and that's the interesting stuff. So, to do that, we need to actually be explicit and seek and share knowledge, right? Sharing knowledge within a company, between teams, is not something we can leave to chance. Because that's what's going to slowly over time trigger new ideas, which allows us to challenge ourselves. Now, I don't believe that a company that reinvents its product on a regular basis, think Intel, is not concerned about sharing knowledge. I think that's a core thing that they always make sure that they do. So if you understand this, we need to find a mechanism that allows ideas to travel between people, right? Because that reinvents us. So, an hypothesis now for continuous improvement, if we are talking in product development, is first, let's establish a baseline. The baseline is the beginning for something that we can persist. Once we have established the baseline, now comes the time to challenge it. What if it will be half the way? What if it will be double? What if, until we find a way to do another control experiment? Examine what is possible, learning about the domain, and once we've done that, we establish a new baseline. And repeating this loop frequently, I believe, could be one way to try to do continuous improvement in our very uncertain domain. Now, for me, a key insight is that we need to seek knowledge and experience outside our doorstep. That will help us challenge ourselves. Now, this is an hypothesis, so I invite you to prove me wrong. Right? This is the hypothesis that we used to do continuous improvement in my case study here. But of course, it's just an hypothesis, right? We need to try it to understand if it's totally wrong. And I hope and I know that there are other ways of doing it in other domains which I do not yet know about. Now, so to sum it up, experiments beats facts, and facts beats emotion. So in our world, we use retrospectives as a mean to do continuous improvement. So retrospectives, I find, is a great tool to gather insight, focus, and ideas. But we must also respect the limitations, whereas I think we have more to learn, and that is retrospectives do not help us persist something. For that, we need other mechanisms, and I'll try to walk you through some of those during this talk. So, that's actually all I had to say.
If you have questions for Mattias.
Hi Mattias, so great talk. Just want to ask you that in any optimization process you run the risk of finding the local optimum. How do you avoid that? Because sometimes we just need a different baseline.
Well, the way that we try to avoid the local optimum was to make sure that we saw the results as a combined result of the different teams or functions. So the way we tried to avoid it was to set the baseline on the output of the system, what these people were doing, instead of in the specific teams. That's how we tried to avoid that. It helped us greatly, because there were many examples where we needed to shift the way that the different departments were doing their work. And when they saw the same situation, that shift was easy. Before that, they resisted. So.
Hello.
Hi.
I have a question regarding the lead time. When you change and start coaching Agile on different projects, the example you gave showed that there was an immediate improvement on the cycle time. However, from my experience, at the beginning, the cycle time a little bit increases, and it's not pretty obvious because we need to usually we need to stop and fix and to train more than that were my cases anyway. Did it happen to you, or is it always like that? An immediate decrease of cycle time? I don't know.
Well, I haven't validated that hypothesis in very frequent occasions, so I don't know. The example I show you is a real example, and it shows you what happened in this company. But to give you an accurate, controlled experiment, you need to redo that with real data, and I don't have that. So I only have emotional-based experience, and I believe that everything you do a change, you go through a certain learning curve, right? And that learning curve, of course, I expect maybe something to slow down for a short period of time. But I believe if you do that, you do this for the long run. However, I encourage you to, whenever you say that we must do something, to rethink and restate that as an hypothesis of something being better, and trying to understand how we're going to validate that that really happens.
Okay.
Other questions?
Did you understand anything what I said? Of course you did. Just pulling your leg.
Okay.
One question.
Hi, I'm Thomas.
Hi.
Relating to the last question, I would like to ask if the lead time would increase. So, shouldn't a Kanban system sort of visualize and enable us to find out about the reason why it's increasing?
Okay, so we observed that lead time from time to time increased. Now, the interesting part about avoiding some optimization was that we learned for some items that we were doing that was a good thing. Some of the items that we were doing, we actually learned that if we spend a little bit more time than we previously did on the item, polishing it until it gets to a state that it's a razor sharp, but it enters the market, it blows the market away. And I have examples where we charged double the margin for our products compared to the competitors and still won the deal. And this was due to us doing better products. So we accepted, for some occasions, that the lead time would increase for the benefit of giving an extraordinary delivery out to the market. So that's how we reason. And you see, so we didn't think of lead time as being the only goal, right? We used that as an hypothesis to see if it helps us bring market value, right? But we had a shared understanding. So sales knew that we were doing this to get a better product. Support knew. The trainers and consultants that potentially might have told the customers that this product should be coming out understood why it wasn't coming out at that date and could hold a discussion with the clients. Right.
I see, thank you.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Anna from Dallas Data.
Hi.
If you said if something unexpected is happening, we should learn from it. How do you motivate your team to do that?
Do they need motivation to learn?
It's easy to think that unexpected things are one-time mistakes, and it's hard to focus on finding mistaken patterns.
Try to motivate them, and actually we didn't actually have a problem with motivating the teams to investigate that. They actually had very big curiosity in finding out what the reason would be. But the way that we try to motivate them to say that the manager must take the initiative, right? The management needs to take the initiative in asking the questions, right? So basically, lead by example, right? And when the manager was when they saw that the manager was actually asking questions, not in a interrogating way, but in a learning way, it sparked the curiosity of the different teams. And even like even really people that been there for decades. So that's how we try to encourage them by using questions and by leading by example.
Thank you.
On the Kanban board, you had 4 charts: business, flow, quality, and support. If you can give more details regarding what was more precisely described in the business chart.
Right. So just a small note. This wasn't a Kanban board because it had no WIP limits, it had no flow work, etc.
Okay.
This was we called it our walk-by board, but you can call it an overview dashboard or whatever you want. But it was a way to see the whole. Now, so the measurement that we had were we had a number of deals made or number of subscriptions, right, which was a driver for the business. Tells us how that was doing. And I can tell you that that's a straight curve, like that. The second was we had the throughput of the team, so it was flow. We had throughput and lead time. And then we had quality. We had a discussion about that, but we chose actually the number of error log entries from production site. Right. There's some options here. You could choose number of reported production incidents, but after some discussion, in our state we thought will be the most accurate description of how the quality was evolving, because we will get both user errors and platform errors, if you say so, right? So that's what we chose, and then fourthly, for support, we had some different items. We had both the ratio of bugs versus questions. That turned out to be interesting because the biggest driver for support issues were not bugs, it was questions, right? So that's learning that we need to invest in usability, for example. Yeah, and for support, I think there's something else which I can't remember off the top of my head right now.
And what about client satisfaction? Did you have something related to that?
No, we didn't have that on the board. I wouldn't exclude it, but it wasn't something that we frequently could collect. So we had a good mechanism in extracting. I mean, we had hundreds of clients around, so we had no easy. But the best thing I think we could have done was to connect some type of feedback from the people that were out installing the product on the market, the ones visiting the clients or the sales, but we didn't have such a mechanism.
Thank you.
I'll tell you that if something didn't work, we heard about it, I promise you.
Question? Okay, so in this whole improvement process, what was your biggest challenge? What was the hardest to do?
So my biggest challenge was to reset the mindset of the people, and especially the management first, into thinking in doing controlled experiments and not just rushing and fixing stuff. And for me, the TDD was a great opportunity, and that's the moment that we learned that provided better learning. And that made the management all up to the top, starting always saying, is that a fact? Reminding each other when they come and say, we need to do this, we need to do that. Right? Is that an hypothesis? Now, how are we going to prove that? Right? So that started the learning. That was, I believe, the biggest challenge that I faced.
Thank you.
Okay.